So I just dropped my Saw X review video a couple days ago and figured I might as well update my official Saw ranking video. If you watch my previous one, this one is going to be a little bit different. I've made a few changes in the mix here. So here we go. Let's get into the ranking of all 10 of these movies. But like always, welcome back to The Haunted Beard, everybody. Thank you for joining me. My name is Jake. It's all horror and thriller movie content on my channel. And listen, do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard. Oh yeah, and one more thing. Check this out. New t-shirt. Planning on getting a little t-shirt store up and running here. So anyways, without further ado, let's get to the ranking. So coming in at number 10, the very bottom of the barrel, and I will say for all 10 of these, there's none of them that I like absolutely hate and think is just terrible. But my least favorite of these, coming in at number 10, is actually going to be Jigsaw. And the main reason for this is that it just felt like such a missed opportunity. This was obviously, they took a handful of years of a break between making Saw the Last Chapter and then trying to reboot the franchise with Jigsaw. And Jigsaw should have been Saw X, but unfortunately we got Jigsaw. And to me, like I said, it's just a missed opportunity, and there's so many things in this movie that are just pretty bad and just completely ridiculous. And I'm thinking of the scene where the guy who gets kidnapped out of his hospital bed is then found like the next day buried in John Kramer's grave, which is so absurd. The one chick who's got all the Saw memorabilia in this massive warehouse. And really, this is just a whole lot of same old, same old. And they don't do anything different with this movie. It's just literally copy, paste, rinse, repeat, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, there's just not really a whole lot here that I found all that worthwhile or interesting. And there's not really any sort of unique or creative decisions made. Like I said, it's just the same old stuff. And then you get to the end, and what is the twist? Well, of course, they jack with the timeline again for like the 5th time in the series, because we've never seen that before. Again, it's just another one of those things that just feels so repetitive. And then you get the reveal at the end of sort of Jigsaw's new protege who's going to continue on the Jigsaw legacy, I guess. And it's just really anticlimactic and not really executed very well at all. So there's just not a whole lot here that I really find all that interesting. I will give the movie a little bit of credit. I do quite enjoy the kill at the end where the dude's head splits open in a bunch of different pieces. It's kind of a fun one, but outside of that, it's just not all that great. I don't absolutely hate it, but there's just not much here that I really get into all that much. Next up at number 9, and I probably have this one a lot lower than most people, but number 9 for me is actually Saw 3. And the main reason for this is that it just doesn't feel that it earns its runtime to me. This movie is almost 2 hours long, and it feels like it's about 20 to 30 minutes too long. It just feels so drawn out and slow, and a lot of it kind of gets a little bit boring. With the exception of the trap at the end where the guy finally confronts the dude who kills his son, his trap where his arms are getting all twisted around and everything, that's a pretty cool kill. Other than that, none of the other ones are really all that memorable. Also, one of the issues I have with this is the character of Amanda. And she kind of just annoys me and drives me nuts in this movie. She's supposed to be Jigsaw's protege and is supposed to carry out his legacy. Jigsaw's this cold, calm, calculated killer. And Amanda in this just comes across like this whiny, emotional baby. And she's kind of just insufferable and really annoying. And so that whole aspect is not very great. There are still some scenes in Saw 3 that I do enjoy, though. I think the brain surgery scene is pretty fantastic and just looks really great and really effective. Just the practical and makeup and stuff like that, those effects I think work really good. One of my more favorite sequences in the entire franchise. I really do like that scene. And then I do think that the twist at the end is actually pretty effective. So there are still some good elements, but I would say I'm still more on the negative than the positive side with Saw 3. Next up at number 8, we've got Saw 5. And Saw 5 for me is the most forgettable of the franchise, as every time I'm kind of going back and trying to remember things about the Saw franchise, when it comes to Saw 5, I just can barely remember anything about it. And so there's just a whole lot of it that is pretty forgettable. But a couple standout points for me. I like the opening kill with the nod to the Edgar Allan Poe hitting the pendulum type deal. That one's a pretty gnarly one. I like that setup there. I also like that they get back to the kind of locked room mystery sort of thing where you've got the group of strangers together who wake up in this room and they're all trying to figure out what's going on and why they're there. So there's a little bit of kind of a flavor from the original Saw, since that was the original setup that you get here. But outside of that, yeah, there's just not much here that's very memorable. I'm not a fan of Hoffman's character, and you get a whole lot of Hoffman in here, which is kind of just meh. And then you also just get a bunch of flashbacks with Jigsaw before he died. And that's kind of the issue that a handful of these Saw movies run into, is that because you killed off John Kramer after the third movie, they relied on so much flashbacks to bring in his character. And so much of those flashbacks just feel like unnecessary filler, and they're giving us information we don't really need. And it's just kind of doesn't really need to be there. And so when you combine that, which doesn't really bring in all that much intrigue, and you combine that with Hoffman, which not really a big fan of, yeah, there's just not a whole lot here in Saw 5 that I really get down with. And so you just kind of get a really forgettable and unmemorable experience overall, with a couple decent parts to it. So that is my number 8. Next up at number 7, and I would be willing to bet I probably have this one higher than most people, but number 7 for me is Saw 7, or 3D, or The Final Chapter, whatever you want to call it. And look, if I was trying to be objective, this would probably be the worst one of the series. But for me anyways, this has sort of a so bad it's good or so bad it's entertaining type quality to it. And this is the Saw franchise just leaning all the way 100% into the 3D gimmick. And it brings a whole lot of just ridiculous cheesiness to it that I kind of find entertaining and funny. And there are plenty of sequences here that you know are just simply in the movie for the sake of executing ridiculous gory kills for the sake of the 3D gimmick. When you have Jill's dream sequence where she gets completely ripped apart by whatever that thing is, I don't even remember. Obviously, it just exists there because, hey, let's make a 3D Saw. And so I totally acknowledge, yeah, it's pretty bad and just totally ridiculous. But again, there's kind of an element of that I find a little bit entertaining. There's the blood here that looks like borderline neon pink that just looks awful. And you've got, unfortunately, a whole bunch more Hoffman in this, which I've already explained my thoughts to you about that. But also, I will give the movie some credit. I do actually kind of enjoy Sean Patrick Flannery's character and his story that he goes on. I think he's one of the more interesting and well-developed characters in the franchise. And so you kind of get half the movie that you spend with him, which I actually kind of get on board for and enjoy that part of this film. And also, too, I have to give a quick shout out to the dude from Linkin Park, because his kill, I think, is phenomenal. It's one of my favorites in the entire franchise when he's sitting there literally glued to the seat of his car, and then it sets off that whole chain reaction thing. I just get a kick out of it. I think it's hilarious, and it's, again, totally absurd and ridiculous and over the top, but I think it's just a fantastic kill. Yeah, unfortunately, the ending in this is just atrociously bad when they brought back Carrie Elwes. It's just really, really bad. So yeah, I mean, trash on the ending of this movie all you want, because it's terrible. But like I said, there's quite a bit of this that I find so bad it's good. And so it is more entertaining for me personally than the previous entries. And that's why it's at number 7. Coming in at number 6 is going to be Spiral from the Book of Saw. This is the spin-off starring Chris Rock, of course. And this one to me is overall, it's pretty good. There's nothing about it that's really great. There's nothing about it that's really bad. I think it's just a solid, pretty good effort overall. And I like in Spiral that it felt like they just got back to the basics of what worked the best about the Saw films, as I feel like at that point, so much of the Saw movies just became about the traps, and this got more to sort of constructing a story first and then having traps and kills within it instead of just basically building movies around these ridiculous trap scenes and kill scenes. I think Chris Rock here is pretty decent. There are some elements of his performance that aren't great, but I do think overall he does a pretty respectable job. I like that they kind of allowed him in certain parts to just sort of feels like he was just kind of improvising and flowing when he can just kind of be who he is and let the comedy kind of come through. Is definitely more when he is in his element, and you can tell that's where he really shines and comes through. Some of the dramatic stuff works pretty well. Other parts of it aren't great, but I think overall he does a pretty decent job. And the thing about Spiral is, while I think it is an above average Saw film, because it is sort of loosely connected to the Saw franchise, in a way it kind of just feels like another sort of serial killer murder mystery type movie. And I think when compared to other ones, it's kind of just average. I mean, this really just sort of feels like 7 light. I mean, it doesn't really hold a candle to those caliber type movies. I also think they do a good job with the villain's motivation, as you can kind of understand why he's doing what he's doing and where he's coming from. So I think they handled that pretty well. And I do appreciate the effort. I'm glad that they try to do something different with this franchise and within the Saw universe. And overall, I still am more on the positive side with Spiral. And that's why it comes in at number 6. Next up at number 5 is going to be Saw 4. And Saw 4 for me also has a little bit of the so bad it's good element, but there also is some, I think, genuinely pretty good stuff in here as well. One of the things that really stands out in this movie is the editing choices, which are just so completely ridiculous, but they kind of work, as you'll just have these sort of extremely quick transitions from one scene to the next, and they're actually able to do this in camera because of how they built the sets. There's the one scene where the detective throws that woman through the glass mirror and it breaks through the wall, and then all of a sudden we're right into a completely different setting and location with new characters, and they're just right in the middle of a scene kind of thing. And so they do that a handful of times throughout this movie, which really stands out. In some ways, it's just kind of ridiculous, but it kind of just sort of works within these types of movies. We also do get some pretty good kills here. I do like the one where the big fat guy is on the hotel bed and he gets his eyes gouged out. That's always a fun one, especially too because of what his character is. And also here we get good old Detective Mean Mug, as I like to call him. And yeah, I get a kick out of him. He's always mean mugging people, and I just think it's hilarious. And so yeah, you get some not great acting, you get some pretty poor dialogue and pretty poor writing in here, but again, some of it's just kind of funny to me, and I just get a kick out of it, and it's entertaining. I also really like the opening sequence when you get Jigsaw's autopsy. Pretty sweet practical effects there that I think look pretty gnarly. I enjoy it, and I also really like kind of how everything culminates in the end with all the guys standing there chained up, and then I can't help it, but the scene where Donnie Wahlberg gets his head crushed by the big old blocks of ice it's just ridiculous, but I love it, and it's just kind of a lot of fun to watch. Anyways, yeah, overall, have a pretty good time with Saw 4. This is definitely, to me, where the franchise does kind of start to shift, though, and change directions, where you can tell they're kind of less concerned about the story and more concerned about let's just get people some gnarly kills, but there's still enough there that I find enjoyable, and so that's why Saw 4 is my number 5. All right, so coming in at number 4, and I would say if I was making a tier list, we'd be jumping up another tier here, but number 4 for me is going to be Saw 6. And Saw 6 for me is a bit of a surprise, and I like here what they do with the insurance companies. It seems like that might be a bit of a winning recipe for this franchise, maybe. But yeah, I like what they do with the insurance company. That whole sequence where Jigsaw's talking to that top-notch executive insurance guy, that's a pretty good scene, and you really get just some good acting out of Tobin Bell and him just really kind of getting into the heart of his character. That's definitely a highlight scene for me. And I also really like the game that the insurance executive ends up having to play. And you kind of get into some more, at least for this franchise anyway, kind of more moral ambiguity, ethical conundrum, just interesting sort of stuff as he's having to choose now, just like he kind of does in his job, of who lives and who dies, right? Who's going to get the insurance treatment, who's not going to. And so it just kind of adds a little bit more something that makes it a little bit more interesting. And so I really like his overall game that he has to play and everything that he has to do and go through. I really like the scene at the end where the people are on the little merry-go-round thing and they're all just chewing him out and cussing him out and yelling at him and everything. It's good Saw fun. What can I say? And I also do like the ending. I think it's a pretty nice little twist, and then you get to see the guy get melted with all the acid. And so, yeah, like I said, it's just some good Saw fun, and it's a bit of a surprise. You know, when you're first going through this, you wouldn't expect the 6-1 to be kind of one of the better ones and a highlight, but I quite enjoy Saw 6, and that's why it's my number 4. All right, top 3 time, and I'll say for these top 3, we have moved up yet another tier. So, coming in at number 3 for me is Saw 2. And really, what is kind of the common ground between these final 3 movies is that I think these ones really kind of get you back to the basics. They're kind of stripped down and simple, but they're just executed really well. And I think Saw 2 is just a really solid follow-up to the original, as I really just like the whole concept of this sort of locked room mystery where you have these group of strangers waking up in some location and having no clue why they're there and what's going on. And then, of course, they're submitted to all these horrific, deadly games. And so that's one storyline with all the strangers in the traps. And then, of course, the other storyline is Donnie Wahlberg. He's the detective who has found Jigsaw. And we finally really get some FaceTime with Tobin Bell, where we really get to see him shine and his performance and his character come through. This is where we kind of really get to dive into a little bit more, especially, let's see. And this is where we really get to kind of dive into the Saw philosophy and his sort of moral code and why he chooses people and sort of just how he operates. And Tobin Bell crushes it. And I think almost everybody who's a fan of this franchise would probably agree Tobin Bell is the best thing about this franchise and his character. And it's just great because here's Jigsaw, who is on his last few days before he dies, basically. And he's just this weak, feeble old man. And he's surrounded by all these cops and SWAT team guys with guns and everything, and yet he's the scariest, baddest dude in the room. Everybody is terrified of this weak old man. And Tobin Bell's performance, man, he just has that screen presence. And so he's just a joy to watch. I absolutely love that. Donnie Wahlberg is also really good too, and they're just kind of back and forth is just fun to watch. And then to expand a little bit more on the other storyline, I just like the element of mystery that it brings. I like trying to figure out what the connection is between all these people. And then you've got some solid kills. And then you've got what might still be the best, in my personal favorite, trap in the entire franchise with the shot needle pit. And still to this day, man, every time Amanda falls into that thing, you kind of just can't help but cringe. It is such a brutal and gnarly scene, but just so great. Whoever thought of that idea is genius. It's just a brilliant concept, and it's just perfect for this franchise. I love it. And I also really like the final twist. I think the reveal that the timelines are not sort of concurrent works really well here. It was also the first time they did it, so it didn't feel like we had seen it a million times already at that point. And then the fact that the kid is literally right there in the room, I thought it was just great. So yeah, big fan of Saw 2. I think it's a really solid follow-up to the original film. All right, coming in at number 2 for me is going to be Saw X. And like I said at the beginning of this, I just dropped my review for it. So if you want more thoughts, check that out. Also, I have reviews for every single movie in this franchise. So if you want more in-depth thoughts, check out those videos. But yeah, Saw X, man, I did not have high hopes. I had very low hopes. I had basically no expectations for this thing, and I was pleasantly surprised. And The best thing about this is, again, that it's about Jigsaw. They focus more on Jigsaw and his character, and Tobin Bell just crushes it. I just genuinely enjoy watching him in this character. He's just a whole lot of fun to watch. And again, this really gets back to the basics. And I like the setup here with, again, the insurance scam, and then bringing all these people into a room, except this time they're not strangers. They all know each other, so a little bit different there. But man, the kills here were just brutal and gnarly, really solid. The one where the dude had to do brain surgery on himself is fantastic. The other one where the girl has to saw off her leg, also really good. The practical effects in this, I thought, were just really top notch. And I like how they ended it. I thought ending it in the way with keeping, spoiler alert, Cecilia alive was just a really good choice. And I'm kind of hoping maybe they continue this. And so this is what Jigsaw should have been when they rebooted the franchise a handful of years ago, but we had to wait a little bit longer. But I'm glad we got this, because I do think there is some fresh life into the Saw franchise. Yeah, I thought they did a pretty solid job with it. And so that's why Saw X is my number 2. But of course, Saw, the original, is still my number 1. And yeah, I mean, what can I say about this? I would say it's pretty much a classic at this point, and it's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. And yeah, I genuinely just kind of love this movie. I think it's just really great. I love what James Wan and Leigh Whannell were able to do with such a low budget, and it's just these two crazy guys who had this insane, crazy idea and just got to it, and they made something pretty special. I love just that central idea of having two strangers wake up in a room and just being like, what the heck is going on? Why are we here? Where is this? And then they're chained to the wall. It's just a great concept, and it instantly just draws you and pulls you right into the movie. And when this originally came out, I didn't see it till at least a few years after, but it was still one of those things where it's like, nobody really seen anything like this before. And so it was just different and unique. And I also like how it's kind of edited and how it tells its story as it just kind of bounces around here and there, filling in little pieces of the puzzle as Leigh Whannell and Carrie Elwes are just sort of recalling details and trying to remember things. And so it's just kind of a mysterious and interesting way of presenting the story that I think works quite well. And of course, the ending is fantastic. Man, every single time, no matter how many times I've watched this, when that Saw theme song clicks in at the end and you just see Leigh Whannell there with his eyes wide, as out of the corner of his eye, you see Jigsaw raising up off the ground. It's just awesome. It makes me smile every single time. I love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, it just blew my mind the first time I watched it. I mean, of course, nobody saw that coming, right? It was just fantastic. So, and it still gets me, man, every time. It's just, when that music hits in, I love it. It's just great. So yeah, Saw, still my favorite. And I gotta say too, and I said this in my Saw X review, man, Saw X, and Saw 2, which are my top 3, and according to the timeline, though, those go right in order. Man, that's a great little trilogy. I think it's just pretty top-notch stuff. So anyways, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for watching. Hit me up down below, though, like always. Let me know your ranking. I know the rankings with this franchise are all over the place, which is kind of what makes it fun. So let me know what you guys think and what your ranking is. Would love to hear from you. That's all I got for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.